Welcome to Chelan County Connection. I'm your host, Randy Rhodes, and today we're joined by Chelan County Commissioner Kevin Oberbay of District 1. Welcome to the program, Commissioner.
Thank you, Randy. It's good to be here.
Let's talk about what we hope to accomplish in these series of podcasts we're doing with the county.
Yeah, the podcast is another tool that the commissioners have. Approximately a little over a year ago, we actually put on a public information officer, Jill Fitzsimmons. And, in government, things are constantly changing. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're using every avenue we can to get information to our citizens. And, on the goings on of the county, whether it's us reacting to something or us being proactive with something. And so this is just another avenue, another tool that we can use. Jill does an incredible job on our Facebook page and getting stories out. But, this is just gives us an opportunity to get even more connected to our citizens that we serve.
Commissioner Oberbay, we're going to be doing these every other Tuesday. They'll be posted on the Chelan County YouTube channel by Thursday of that week. And we're proud to be here on the first episode of Chelan County Connection. And again, thanks for being here today. We have a little bit of ground to cover. Let's start with the 2023 budget. What can you tell us briefly about the budget, if you would? And, how are things looking for next year?
Yeah, as we're starting to see economies starting to slow a little bit. Our budget this year, we came in at about $51 million in expenditures, which is almost $2 million over last year in expenditures. Our revenue piece is about $46 million. So we've got about a $5 million gap on the budget. We started off with about a $7 million gap. Really did some good hard work. We're able to carve about $2 million out of the asks. And we still have a little bit of work to go. I will say that this morning we got a little bit of a better piece of better news from our auditor. We took a look at our expenditures to date, and we're about $1.5 million under what we had budgeted to date for expenditures. And we are about $1.9 million over with regards to what we anticipated our revenues would be. So that's about a $3.5 million variance. If this kind of holds true to the end of the year, instead of looking at about a $5 million gap, we'll be looking at about a $1.5 million gap. We still have about 4 or 5 weeks to go here before we have our budget hearing and then before we adopt our final budget. So we're still looking at revenue pieces to make sure that we're adequately tracking what revenues are coming in and what we're anticipating those will be. I will say that some of the impacts that we've felt with regards to legislation that occurs in Olympia, we in the commissioner world call them unfunded mandates. Basically, those take away opportunity, and they also take away revenue opportunity for counties. And so anytime we're asked to do more and then aren't funded to do those things, those sources of revenue have to come from somewhere. What we've actually seen since 2018 was really the last year that our revenues met our expenditures, evenly. So what we've actually found is we've seen a growth in our expenditures of about 4.8% per year, with a growth of our revenue of about 2.6. So it's not hard to do the math, but we're falling about 2.2% short, every year of what it costs for us to provide services to the citizens versus the funding that we take in.
Commissioner Oberbay, what kind of cuts have been made for the 23 budget?
So when we take a look at across the board at the budget itself, when we look at the budget, every department has an opportunity to make asks, whether it's ask for personnel, ask for equipment, ask for programmatic pieces, whatever it might be. What we have the obligation to do is take a look at that and say, is this a necessary task that is legislated, by the legislature that's mandated to us? Or is this a task that basically is something that we would like to do? And can we afford to do that? And so really it's balancing the have tos with the like tos. And then basically what we also did is went through and we did a 5-year historical perspective of, but line item by line item, of what expenditures were made over the last 5 years. There are oftentimes when you look at, especially in the past budgeting pieces, not necessarily in the county, but in other institutions, it's like a use it or lose it kind of thing. Everybody at the end of the year starts to spend it down because they want to make sure they have that line item next year. And but what we do is we say, hey, look, if you need it, we'll provide it for you if it's a service that has to be provided. But if it's something that you don't have to do, we just ask you to be very, conservative about how you spend the taxpayer dollars, be very frugal with those dollars, use what you have to. And that's why we have, I think, such a large expenditure piece that is still kind of a positive variance of the 1.5, because our elected officials and our department heads are really good about being fiscally responsible and using what they need. And so what we did is we basically went back and said, we have this in the budget. It hasn't been used for 5 years, or it's only been used to this level. So let's take it down to that level and kind of get some of that funding back. And that way, basically what it does is it closes that gap.
You mentioned a little bit earlier potential slowing in the economy or perhaps even a recession. How is Chelan County, planning looking toward that topic?
It was funny that you asked me that, Randy, because before I came into office and as I was coming into office, it was right at the tail end of the other recession, that great recession that we had, the 2009. And I came into office in 2017. The economy was starting to really recover and things were going well. I did take a look at how did counties survive? How were they able to kind of be on top and not have to make, deep cuts to personnel? And there were actually three legs of the stool. They had built into their budget a pretty healthy reserve. They also had built in to the budget some areas that had flexibility. So I talked about us, going back and looking at the 5-year spending plan. And while while it may not be spent down, we still have money in there that can still be taken out. And then the third thing is successful counties were able to look at capital projects that were shovel ready, where there was funding already ready available to be able to put into those projects. And what that did is that kept folks working within their community, kept the sales tax running. Basically, people were still spending money. And what it did is it actually helped them kind of dull that curve, so to speak, and, that sharp edge. And so really what we're looking at is we're looking at funding sources right now. Our 0.09 Cascade Public Infrastructure Fund, where we provide to entities funding to do projects. We're looking at economic development pieces where we're in partnership with the port. We have Microsoft that's looking to perhaps move into our community, and we'll potentially be having construction over the time that is occurring. That will keep folks working. We're looking at projects that we can make investments in from funding sources that is not the operating budget. And so if we take a look and we basically, put forth those three elements, I think that we can try to stave off some of this. Doesn't mean that we're not going to be impacted, but I think that we can kind of lessen the blow. The other piece is we're looking at this budget 2023 with 2024's budget in mind, because every time we have that gap gets carried over to the next year. So if you don't have a revenue source to offset that gap, then you're not only going to be bringing 2023's budget gap into 24, but 24's budget gap into 25.
Joined on Chelan County Connection by District 1 Chelan County Commissioner Kevin Overbay. And Commissioner Overbay, we know the preliminary budget was passed last week. Any kind of timeline for the final?
Yeah, we're actually looking to potentially approve the final budget about mid-December. We do have a public hearing set for the 12th of December. And then hoping that probably the week after that, the 19th, is when we'll adopt. We always like to try to get that done before the end of the year. Makes it nice. We're actually required by statute to do so. But, when we still have, like I said, a little bit of work to do. I think we basically looking at if everything holds, and we have roughly about $800,000 more that we need to look at to really kind of be in good financial shape. So if we can carve another $800,000 out of our existing budget, I think we'll be there.
Commissioner Overbay, we move and turn our attention to county land surplus. Let's talk about that declared 83 acres, and you played a large part in that. Give us the little bit of the history of that project and how it came to be.
Absolutely. So when I first came into office in 2017, I asked the assessor's office, can you please give me a list of all of the county-owned parcels? And I was shocked that the county owned 181 parcels. Now, understand that some of the ownership of the county on the parcels are actually some of the ground that I'm actually sitting on right now, which is a county campus. But, and there's other parcels that have uses for public works and other uses that we have, within the county, like the Center for Drug and Alcohol Treatment. That building is a county-owned building. So, but what I did is I had an opportunity to go through that with my peers at the time, which was Doug England and Keith Gaynor. And we identified parcels in each one of our district that we basically had our public works section look at and others and said, look, is this something that's going to be needed either now or into the future to serve the citizens of Chelan County? And we actually were able to come up with about a list of 50 parcels out of the 181. And so out of that, 35 of those parcels have been able to make it to a surplus list. This has been, I will tell you, almost a 6-year project to get it to the finish line. But I was really happy to be able to see this come to fruition. Been a lot of assistance from the prosecuting attorney's office, from the assessor's office, the treasurer's office. He's will be taking the lead with regards to surplusing some of those parcels out to auction. And so I'm really excited about the fact that we can get this into the tax rolls. And the reason being, when I first came in, and even now, about 87% of the county is in public ownership, which leaves 13% in private ownership. And the public ownership doesn't necessarily pay taxes. Granted, we get a payment in lieu of taxes from the federal government, but it's about $2 per acre is what it kind of figures out to be for the 1.5 million acres that they have in their inventory. And so really it kind of falls on the taxpayers. Every time that, we do have a cap on the taxes. And so every parcel that you could add reduces the per thousand rate to the average citizen and their parcel. And so by adding 35 parcels, those parcels will then take on a share of the tax burden that currently is in place. And we're a little over 14 million. So adding 35 parcels will help. It may be I haven't done the math on that yet, but it may be upwards of a 5 to 10% a thousand reduction. And the same thing with economic development. Every time we bring in economic development, industry pays for services as well because they take on the lion's share of the tax burden. And so what this whole piece is let's make sure there's some more property out there that can be economic viable, that can go into private ownership, that can help spread the tax burden to everybody and reduce that a little bit, and also help us out on a one-time into the coffers of the county.
You mentioned 35 lands being surplused. What's the process on, going to public auction or even to other municipalities around?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have 12 of the lands of the 35 will actually be to a direct auction, and that will be online. And that will actually be hosted by the treasurer. And so there will be more information forthcoming on his website. And then 7 properties will actually be transferred. They're very de minimis in size and value, will be directly transferred to property owners that have the adjacent parcel. So it might be, say, Randy, that if you were one of the recipients, maybe your parcel fronts a road, and the foot that comes from the roadway edge into your parcel that goes across the width of it, say 85 feet. So it's 1 foot wide by 85 feet. It has no value to anybody but you. Those are little pieces that have no value to the citizens as well. So that would actually just be quick claimed over to those willing recipients of those parcels there that have the adjacent. And then we have 10 parcels where there are multiple adjacent property owners. In those 10 parcels, what we'll do is those are going to be a sealed bid process, and those will be offered to those adjacent property owners first. There is a minimum value to each, and that is listed, by each parcel with the minimum value that's been established. If that minimum value is met on a sealed bid, then we will basically sign those over to that property owner with the highest minimum bid. If no property owners then of the adjacent property pieces make a bid, then what we will do is those will then go on the auction list as well and open to the general public. And then there will be 6 properties that will be transferred to municipalities.
I was wondering, what kind of public response have you been getting with the news of the surplus now?
I will tell you that over 6 years, we've made a lot of decisions as a commissioner, but this one has garnered, I think, some of the most public response. And it's not been a negative public response, it's been a positive. And folks really want information because folks really want to own property in Chelan County.
Why surplus? Why would you surplus these lands? What do you, want to accomplish for the county and your constituency out here?
Well, the surplusing, basically, there's not a need. There's not a governmental need, and government should not hold any property that it doesn't need to hold. And so we want to minimize, the footprint of the ownership of the government, entity, basically Chelan County. But we also want to make sure that those properties are being put to good use where, there could be job creation from some of those properties. There could be a housing element that comes along with that, where a workforce housing, where we team up with entities such as a housing trust or housing authority. There are some natural resource pieces that come along with that. So I talked about the first phase, which is this 35. There's a second phase of about 10 properties that we're looking at that we do have to do some boundary line adjustments and some parcel IDs on, that those we're hoping to get that done over the next year and then get those out into the marketplace as well.
So are most of these lands outside the metro area, out in the county then?
Yeah, I would say that probably it's about a 50, about a 60 to 40%. We have a lot of lands that are contained within the city limits, whether it's in Chelan or Wenatchee. But we do have them in the UGA urban growth area. And then the other share of the lands are kind of outside of any UGA. And so there are some lands up in the Leavenworth area. There are lands up at Lake Chelan. There are lands in the Sunny Slope area, some lands in Malaga. So it pretty much covers the county as a whole.
Commissioner Overbay, our topics today have been budget and surplus lands. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to dovetail off before we get scooting for the day?
Randy, I just appreciate the opportunity to kind of share this information with the citizens. I will say that there's a lot of things that we're working on. This is a very proactive board. We've chosen to be that way. We have a great opportunity here to continue to make, Chelan County a great place to live, work, and play. And I'm just excited about the fact that I get to be a part of that. And we're looking to see who our new partner is going to be coming in. And being that today is election day. And so we'll see over the coming weeks who that's going to be. Welcome them in and continue to forge ahead to try to serve the citizens the best way possible. I will say, maybe for some just ticklers for some coming episodes, maybe is to maybe talk a little bit about regional diversion facility, mental health pieces that we're working on with 3 other counties. So that'd be for North Central Washington, and basically taking a look at pathways pieces to connect our communities is another project we're working on. And then basically taking a look at forest health pieces and perhaps a forest products campus type piece for economic and for the safety of communities. So just a ton of stuff happening.
Well, this is the inaugural edition of Chelan County Connections, and District 1 Commissioner Kevin Overbay. If there's nothing else, I'd like to say thank you very much for taking time out of your day to join me today. Greatly appreciate that.
It's been my pleasure, Randy. This is great, and I appreciate you letting me be the first one to kick this series off.
So good to see you again. It's been a little while. It's been a minute.
It has been. It's definitely been a minute. So good to see you.
Very good. Commissioner Overbay, thank you very much again for joining us. This is the debut episode of Chelan County Connections. I'm your host, Randy Rhodes. We'll see you right here next time.